We're looking at characteristics of life, and one of the characteristics of life is that they are highly organized. So we're going to look at levels of organization in biology. An atom is the smallest unit of an element. And so here's an atom. There are protons and neutrons in it, and there are electrons that zip around. We'll talk about atoms in a little bit. These are all the different atoms. Well, actually, these are all the different elements that are made out of atoms. You'll need to know carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. Those are the major things that make up living things. Calcium and sodium and potassium we'll also talk about a little bit, but these are the major ones that you'll need to know. You can worry about the other elements in chemistry next year. If you put atoms together, you make molecules. So a molecule is two or more atoms combined. So here's an example of a molecule. This is a water molecule. It is, you might recognize it as H2O. That means there's two hydrogens, and you could put a 1 here if you want to, and 1 oxygen. You don't have to put the 1. So here's the 1 oxygen, and here are the 2 hydrogens. These are 3 atoms that are combined to make 1 molecule. Organelles are structures inside a cell with a specific function. So this is a complex cell. It's called a eukaryotic cell, and it's got lots of things in it. It's got a nucleus in it. It's got these mitochondria, Golgi bodies, endoplasmic reticulum, different vesicles, maybe some lysosomes in there. It has these things called ribosomes. All cells have these organelles. These are the organelles where proteins are made. So even the very simplest cells, the bacteria, have ribosomes. So an organelle is a structure inside of a cell with a specific function. It kind of sounds like organ, like your stomach, but remember, stomach is an organ. It's made out of cells. The cells all have organelles in them. So that's how you can remember this cute little part, organelle. It's a little tiny structure inside of a cell. A cell is the smallest unit of life, and you can put a star next to this. Don't confuse it with an atom, which is the smallest unit of an element, not of life. So a cell is the smallest unit of life. Now what we're going to look at are multicelled organisms. If you're looking at just a bacterium, it is unicellular, just one cell. If you look at things like us or plants or animals, we've got tissues. So a tissue is a group of cells and cell products with a specific function. So for example, cardiac tissue. That is the tissue that's in your heart, and its function, it has a specific function. Its function is to contract, so it pumps blood. Another tissue might be osseous tissue, which is bone tissue. That's a group of cells, and then the cell products there are collagen and this matrix with calcium in it. And their function, there's a whole bunch of functions of bone. One is just to keep your body tall and maybe protect your brain, that kind of thing. So we'll talk about that stuff in a few more units. Here's an example. Here's muscle tissue. That looks like skeletal muscle tissue. This is a type of epithelial tissue which lines all of the surfaces of you. So this might be the epithelial tissue that makes up the mucous membrane in your mouth, for example. And it's a bunch of really densely packed little cells. Here's a type of connective tissue. You'll find this underneath your skin. Here's a neuron. This type of tissue is found in your brain and your spinal cord and all your nerves. And this looks like dense fibrous connective tissue. You don't need to know anything about these different tissues. This one is in your tendons and ligaments. But the thing that you need to know is that there are all these specialized cells that function together. They have a specific function. And if you're really curious about these, take anatomy in a couple of years. Okay, so far what we've looked at are all these different tissues. We've got some smooth muscle tissue, loose connective tissue, nervous tissue, blood tissue. This is a type of epithelial tissue. All of these tissues working together make up this thing, an organ. So an organ is a group of tissues with a specific function. So the stomach has epithelial tissue in it that secretes enzymes and lines and protects. It also secretes mucus. It's got capillaries with blood in it, and those absorb the nutrients into the blood. Then there's connective tissue, which you find right underneath the epithelial tissue to kind of connect it to the muscle. Here's some smooth muscle that helps your muscles contract, helps your stomach contract to move the food around and to move the food through. And then again, some more, some loose connective tissue. And the important thing, let me go backwards a second, the important thing is not that you memorize each tissue. That's the subject of anatomy and physiology. The important thing for me is that you understand that these different tissues work together to make this thing called an organ. A stomach is an organ, the pancreas is an organ, your brain is an organ. Each bone is an organ. Your kidneys are organs. An organ system, that's when you have a whole group of organs with a specific function. So one example here is the nervous system. You've got the brain, that's an organ, and you've got the spinal cord and all the different neurons that come out. Here's another example of an organ system. This is the digestive system. It's got your mouth, all the salivary glands here in purple. Here's the esophagus. The stomach is another organ. Small intestine, this thing's the large intestine, and then you've got the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. These are a bunch of organs, and their specific function is to digest food so that you can absorb it and use it. So a multicellular organism is the last level of organization of living things, at least for multicellular things. And so this is a multicellular organism. Her name's Rosalind Franklin. She was super important in discovering DNA's structure. And here's a kitty because it's so cute. This is a different multicellular organism. And that really gross thing, looks like maybe a termite, is another multicelled organism. Yay! Okay, so here's the chemical level. Atoms combine to make molecules. Molecules combine to make organelles, which then make muscle cells, or any kind of cell. The cells come together to make tissues. The tissues, a bunch of tissues come together to make an organ. So a blood vessel is an organ because it's made of different tissues. You've got connective tissue, you've got smooth muscle tissue, epithelial tissue. Those are three different tissues that are coming together to make an organ. Here's your organ system. It's the cardiovascular system. You've got all your blood vessels and your heart. So there's the complete organism now. Oops, here's the complete organism. She's made up of not just the cardiovascular system, but all the other systems, the digestive, circulatory, respiratory put together. Quiz time. Bacteria belong to unicellular group. Put the following in order in terms from, blah, blah, blah. Put the following terms in order from smallest to largest. So atom would be the first one. And then you put atoms together to make molecules. Molecules come together to make, let's see, it's organelle. Yep, organelles. So this was 2, this is 3. An organelle, you put those together to make a cell. You put the cells together to make tissues. Wow, that's number 4. Tissues come together to make organs, which is number 5. Organs come together to make an organ system, which is number 6. And the organism is number 7. Which term is the smallest unit of life? Now be careful, we're looking at the smallest unit of life, not the smallest unit of an element. The smallest unit of life is a cell. You are an example of which level? You are an organism. The cardiovascular system is an example of an organ system. Mitochondria are examples of organelles. Carbon is an example of an atom. DNA is an example of a molecule. So give me an example of an organ: your stomach, your kidney, your brain, your pancreas, your heart, your blood vessel. Now we're going to go beyond the individual level. Population is the next one. This is a group of individuals of the same species living in an area at the same time. So a species is any group of organisms that can reproduce together. So for example, it would be a population of termites in my backyard, boo. Or it could be a population of gorillas living in Kenya, I don't know where they live. Or it could be a population of sparrows that live in my neighborhood, for example. But it would be all the same species. A community is the populations of all the species occupying the same area at the same time. So if you look at my swamp in the backyard, there are tadpoles. So if you looked at all the tadpoles, all of the fireflies, all of the different species of birds, all of the turtles, all of the different plants, if you looked at all of those together, that would be the community of my swamp. An ecosystem is a community and its physical environment. So for example, it would be all that stuff I just mentioned, plus the water, plus the soil, plus the rocks, anything that's abiotic, non-living. And then a biosphere is everything. It's those regions of the Earth's waters, crust, and atmosphere which organisms can exist. So here's a picture of that. Here's the biosphere. It's everything that's living. It's the land that has living things on it, all the parts of the land. and down to wherever the lowest worm or bacterium is, and then up as high as the tallest, the highest bird can fly. An ecosystem is a community and its non-living surroundings. So these are all the living things here, plus the streams and the rocks and the air. If you take out these abiotic things, what you're left with is a community. These are all the living things here. Then if you focus in on just one species, you've got a population, and you take just one of those out, and there's your organism. And of course, the organism is made out of organ systems, which are made out of organs, which are made out of tissues, which are made out of cells, which are made out of organelles, which are made out of molecules, which are made out of atoms. There you have the whole thing. So fish, snails, clams, muskrats, ducks, plants, and algae that live on Lake Pleasant are, let's see, I've got living things of all different species. Okay, so I've only got the living things. So I know the biosphere is everything, everything, everything. I know an organism is just one of those things. Let's see. This isn't just one type of organism, so I'm going to get rid of population. I know my ecosystem has the abiotic things, the water and stuff, so I'm going to go with community for that one. Yay. Those regions of the Earth's waters, crust, and atmosphere in which organisms can exist. That's the big one. That's the biosphere. That means living sphere. That's the whole planet. Your Earth is a sphere. Okay, the fish, snails, clams, blah, 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 plus the water, the rocks, the sand, the soil. So now we're going beyond just the living things, and so that's an ecosystem. The freshwater clams, only the clams, but all the clams that live there are a population. The freshwater clam that lives in Lake Pleasant is, so as in one freshwater clam, it is an organism.